and I will say absolutely 100% without reservation, I support the right of self-defense without any doubt. I would be involved myself in violent resistance if I were a citizen of Palestine or Iraq or Afghanistan. And if I were a citizen of the United States or Britain and someone from halfway around the world came into my country and started stealing my land and killing my family, guess what? I would defend my country as well.
This was a fiery Ken O'Keefe in his younger years. I had a chance to interview Ken here in Amsterdam, and originally this interview was out but in 2 parts. I thought I'd give it another try because right now, as I'm recording this, there's a new Gaza Freedom Flotilla out there on the water heading straight for a place that's been under siege for nearly 2 decades. And the world? It's watching or pretending not to. Depends on the feed that you're plugged into. And that brings me back to Ken. Now, if you don't know who he is, well, get ready. Ken is not your average ex-Marine. Back in 2010, he was on the Mavi Marmara, the ship, the very ship in that meanwhile infamous Gaza Freedom Flotilla that was stormed by Israeli Commandos. 9 people were killed that day, or that night. And Ken, he disarmed 2 Israeli commandos with his bare hands, while machine gun fire rained down from helicopters, killing his comrades. So, not your typical peace activist, I would say. See, that wasn't his first rodeo. In 2003, Ken led the Human Shield Action in Iraq. He literally brought Westerners to Baghdad, put their bodies on the line to try to stop the US bombings of civilian targets. Think about it for a second. He was trying to protect Iraqis from his own government, not exactly the way to make friends at home. Now the timing for this republication isn't random. June 8 marks 58 years since the USS Liberty was attacked, by Israeli commandos. 34 American sailors killed, over 170 wounded. It was one of the largest attacks since the Second World War. It was supposed to look like Egypt did it to drag the US into the war. And before anyone reaches to the conspiracy label, don't. This isn't speculation. It's documented, classified, and buried for a reason. That's why most Americans have never heard about it. If you want to know more about this, I've got survivor interviews and interviews with a number of subject matter experts on my YouTube channel. But for those who really want to know the details, I published a full expose on my Substack. Links in the description. But for now, let's listen closely. Because Ken, he's not just a witness to history, he was an active part in shaping it. And he's one of those rare people who refuse to look away when others do. Ken O'Keefe, I'm really happy to have you here. I'm glad we could arrange to get you here despite your airline troubles and maybe some interference of Big Brother, but that's a different story. How are you?
I'm blessed, I've really all the challenges and all the travails. I love it. I love life, and I want to make the most of this beautiful thing called life and also protect the soul. So I'm doing good. Thank you, God.
And Amsterdam is a nice place to have some good time.
It is a fun place indeed, and it brings back a lot of memories having lived here.
If you would encapsulate Ken O'Keefe in a nutshell, I mean, we're gonna dive into this a bit later, but in a nutshell, how would you, present yourself to an audience who has never heard about you?
Well, I'm a California boy, born in the summer of love, 1969, and I grew up surfing and going to the beach and playing football, and I've always been quite competitive. I've always been really blessed too, and so I had fun. I enjoyed my life a lot as a kid. I had jobs and I was just really enjoying life, but I watched a movie, Full Metal Jacket, and like that, I was like, that's what I need, and that really set my course. I was naive, I was young, I was dumb, but I was very committed to anything I do, and the Marines was no different. I learned a lot of life lessons there, and I took my own red pill.
You just introduced en passant a very important detail, Marines.
yes, this was the penultimate sort of pivotal moment that set the rest of my life course on a track. And the irony, I love irony. So while I was in the Marines, you know, I got an unlawful order, and, you know, without getting into too much detail, everything switched. I went from being the best Marine to the most hated Marine because I did the right thing, the honorable thing, what I believed I signed up for, leadership by example and all this. I didn't follow, I didn't sign up to just follow orders. I joined to defend my nation. I believed that we were freedom and democracy. We were the good guys. I was young and dumb, but, you know, that's what I believed. When I did that, and I got done hard by the Marines, judged wrongly. One of the things it did was I realized, you know, listen, however institutions or governments or even the public judge you, this really doesn't matter. What you need to be is honest with yourself as a human being. And if you can be honest with yourself and you really do give your best and your intentions are pure, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks, whatever their judgments are. And throughout life, I've realized through so many beautiful divine experiences that at the end of the day, there's one judge. It's the only judge I care about. Family and whatnot, of course, I care what my family thinks, and I want them to love me and feel loved. But even family, you know, just because they're family doesn't mean necessarily their judgment is correct.
What's the one thing that you took away from the Marines? The one formative thing that influenced the rest of your life?
The big thing, so you've got indoctrination leading into joining. Little did I know I was a mercenary for the banksters. I didn't know any of that. But what it taught me was, and I was willing to kill or be killed in the Marines. I was a grunt in the infantry, machine gunner. I realized when they did me wrong, okay, I was wrong about the Marine Corps. What else am I wrong about? When I got out of the Marines, Jesus' words rang true, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. I studied voraciously. I read Chomsky, I read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, Black Like Me, so many different books, The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, and I realized, like, whoa, everything I've been taught basically is a lie. History is a lie. My own birth nation, the world. So I became, in a healthy way, addicted to truth, like the red pill constantly. I want the truth, no matter how painful. And as I matured over the years and I tested boundaries and was able to achieve some really quite beautiful things, it just, the more I learned, the more I was able to make connections, and the more I really did commit. Actually, the thing from the Marines that I realized a couple years after the Marines, I read a book called The End of Nature by Bill McKibben. And in that book, he makes a powerful argument that nuclear war pales in comparison to genetic engineering, and how when we tinker with DNA and play God, one experiment gone wrong could create a chain reaction, which could be catastrophic. And I was like, oh my God, like, why isn't everybody a bit preoccupied? I mean, we can blow each other up, we can tinker with DNA, we can throw off all life on planet Earth, potentially disrupt the balance and destroy everything. Like, why is not everybody a bit fixated on this? And that's where I started to learn more about, you know, programming, mind control, and all sorts of stuff that get us to basically choose willful ignorance.
Before we dive into all those details, yeah, what do you think, yeah, is the thing that you are most known for?
I'd say,
from all the, you know, there's a whole spectrum of your persona and of your activities in the last decades. But what do you think is the one thing? If someone types in Ken O'Keefe on Google, what's the first thing that comes up?
It's funny, if you'd asked me that 15 years ago, I would have definitely said human shields. I had a plan. It incorporated law, the Fort Geneva Convention, protected persons under law. And I can honestly say that we came close to stopping that war. We made it untenable for them to do what they did if white Western people are at these sites. So, and then I didn't. I failed, and it hurt so bad to come so close to something so great, so beautiful, that would have saved 2 million lives. never mind all the Americans that
So
died
that was almost it.
Almost.
So what's the real thing?
So the lesson that was the first thing that I was known for, but I think maybe now it's the Mavi Marmara, the Freedom Flotilla, but even that isn't, there's a lot of obfuscation and whatnot. I mean, the true story of what happened, I could easily write a book about that alone. So I think probably more people know that, and the interviews that I've done from Hard Talk on the Human Shield Action, so that was 2003, and then the Hard Talk interview number 2, that was 2010. And if you ask the Israelis, I guess I'm known for being an operative of Hamas who was going to Gaza to form and train a commando unit for Hamas. I'm honored that the IDF says that of me. Honored.
Yeah. You're the second interviewee with a so-called connection to Hamas. I interviewed Stanley Cohen, the so-called Hamas lawyer, right? Yeah. Also a highly misunderstood persona.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's the tactic of the enemy: mudslinging, innuendo, slander, libel. The Anti-Defamation League, which has me as a rabid anti-Semite, white supremacist-leaning guy, these guys are in the defamation business, yet they call themselves the Anti-Defamation League. Their whole point is to cut free speech, and any criticism, legitimate or not, of Israel is not allowed. You're automatically an anti-quote Semite if you say anything, even no matter how true it is. Careers are lost over this, but I'm an independent guy. I march to my own tune. If I need to, I can live in the street. That's the beauty of being a grunt. I've lived in holes in the ground. I've done stuff that most people would wither under. So it makes you hard, you know. I'm willing to pay any price.
And you are not the only one. I just interviewed Mikko Pelet's sister, Nurit Pelet. She recently lost her job for speaking out.
Yes,
yeah.
Indeed.
So it's also in academia where free speech is out of the window.
Science, speak the truth about this experimental injection. That wasn't allowed. In fact, they're still doing it. You can't say just what we all know. You're not allowed to say it. So where's free speech? Aren't we living in a free and democratic society over here? I mean, that's the theory.
From a US Marine to, how shall I describe you, a critic, a vocal critic, not only of Israel, but also of the US, right? So where was the key eureka moment? Right? What turned you around? Or was it a gradual process? Can also be, huh?
Well, that period in my 20s where I studied voraciously, I was building and building and building this.
It was after the Marines, right?
Yes, coming out of the Marines. So this developed, but it really reached a peak because I was in the first Gulf War as a Marine. So from 89 to 92, I was in the Marines. I was in Operation Desert Storm. I earned a combat action ribbon, which is like what every Marine wants, yeah. It says you've seen combat, and I did it in an infantry capacity with a machine gun. So that war, at the time, I felt it was justifiable that Iraq shouldn't have the right to go into Kuwait. It ignores a lot of historic facts, Sykes-Picot, all sorts of historic things. Nonetheless, I agreed with that principle. Plus, I came from Hawaii. America stole the Kingdom of Hawaii, which is an independent nation. The annexation was illegal, so I already had a well-rounded understanding of law. But by the time the second invasion and this whole weapons of mass destruction lie came around, I listened to a guy named Scott Ritter. He's a Marine. He was a weapons inspector, and he said it at the time, and I cited him in interviews.
He still says it.
He still says it. And he was right, and so was I. But I was using him as a source as well as other sources to say, even if they do have weapons of mass destruction, where'd they get them? From us, from America, from Britain, from Russia too, the Soviet Union at the time. So the war-making industry, the military-industrial complex, as Eisenhower so famously warned us about in his last words as president, and he would know, wouldn't he? This is a scourge of humanity. People are making big money in one capacity or another for these defense contractors.
True. But I'm still wondering, where's your, eureka moment? How did that happen?
So the second Gulf War, it was really personal for me because I was in the first one. Now, as much as I've said about Israel, I didn't start there. I started with my own birth nation because I believe that if, as a son, an American-born son, my first obligation, if my nation needs a defender, then I should be willing as an able-bodied man to defend it. But if my nation is also committing crimes, it is my duty to speak about these crimes so as to remedy the matter. I feel this is critical. This is true American patriotism, which sadly is, I don't know, they're waving that damn flag, but what about your Constitution? I took an oath. I swore that I would protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and to fight all enemies, foreign and domestic. The enemy is inside the gate. Russia's not the problem. China's not the problem. It's our own government. And it's no different here in Holland, or England, or anywhere in Europe, or what, Canada, or Australia. Do these people represent us for real? If so, then we're all guilty of genocide and facilitating it. And worse, war crimes, torture, you name it. Hypocrisy on steroids. I don't like hypocrisy, and I don't like bullies.
So you're indicating it was a gradual process, if I understand you right?
It was, but then, you know, when the second invasion of Iraq was being instigated by a lying media who I call the prostitutes of propaganda, it was really personal. It was like, I can't believe we're doing this again. I participated in the first one. My duty is to try and stop this one. Now, most people aren't supposed to think that they can stop a war. You know, that's grandiose. But in America, we are infected with this idea that we can achieve anything, which is sort of the beautiful thing about America. Delusional as it might be in some cases.
And that would be a good segue into the human shield action that you started. So to give a little bit of structure of this interview, so I have a couple of key points that I would like to discuss. One, of course, is the flotilla. Actually, there are two. The Aloha Palestine, we could march of return, road to hope, these kind of things. So we follow this path. So it's maybe a good thing to start with the human shield action, which I believe is one of the first major activities.
Yeah, I mean, I did rescue sea turtles, and I was a dive instructor, and and I got international attention. Even BBC, Animal Planet did stories, but everybody loves turtles, so you know that was just a popular thing, and I could have stuck with that and still be doing that. But I realized that we could blow up the world, and I was like, whoa, no, you know, I love this beautiful realm we have here. It's absolutely beautiful. We should cherish it. We should treat it like our mother. But then the human shield action came, and it was so personal. So the plan was based on law. If we go back to Nuremberg, the greatest crime that they...
Before we do this, I would be interested in the why, right? I mean, it's not an activity that you sit on a lazy Sunday afternoon and, you decide. So, how is the thought process? How is that? Because that was quite an activity. You told me prior to this interview, 3 double-deckers. So,
it's a good question.
But
yeah.
also psychologically, I mean, you and everybody could have been killed. It's not just, a minor, weekend trip.
You're making my point. The actions of our government with the use of our taxes is being used to murder people in mass, to torture them, to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity. Going to a protest, and I said this, in fact, in the lead up to the human shields, I was saying, your protests and petitions aren't going to do a damn thing. They made this decision. This is happening. And if you really want to show how much you reject these wars of aggression, then we need to put ourselves in harm's way, because there is an imbalance between the way we measure the value of life. So, Palestinians, we've got 14,000 dead kids today, more actually. They hardly matter. But if you had even one white child, one, who's in a power plant or a water treatment facility, a protected site because of civilians needing water and electricity, or they will die, one white person, the whole nation would hear about it. If you had one Dutch person defending a site based on international law, the Fort Geneva Convention, trying to save lives with no offensive terrorism trying to defend life, it's a problem. Yet, we killed, 500,000 children with sanctions in Iraq, and Madeleine Albright says it was, quote, worth it? Obviously we don't. Can you imagine 500,000 dead kids anywhere in the West? Yeah. So that is a perverse reality of the world we live in, but it's also a powerful tool that I put forward in an argument. My argument was, if we really want to stop this war, then we need to be willing, not tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, I argued that 10,000 human shields would stop that war. I stand by that position. Unfortunately for me, the infiltration came, and this is the modus operandi of the enemy. They infiltrate, they subvert, and then it got destroyed before my eyes. And I touched greatness with a lot of beautiful people, and then I watched it crumble before my eyes. It took me a good year or two to recover from that, but I was bang on again the following year, burning my passport in Baghdad and going to Palestine for the first time. So it taught me there's no guarantees. You set lofty goals, big goals. The chances are that you won't succeed, but try. Better to try and fail than to not try at all.
I have a whole list of attempts that you tried.
Yes.
Quite
I'm a
remarkable.
failure, actually. When you get down to it, I failed to stop the invasion of Iraq. I failed to break the blockade of Gaza. I failed, but I try. And you know, we must try. We must.
Because you just brought it up, yeah, the blockade of Gaza. Maybe we start there. And I know from our previous discussion, it's actually not the starting point. There was a less publicized first attempt. So maybe you elaborate.
Free Gaza.
That was in 2006, the first one.
2008.
2008.
2008.
Yes.
Yeah. So
So prior to the actual event that has been publicized worldwide, there was a smaller version. Let's say, you know, you ramped up the effort, yeah? So the smaller version, a couple of boats, yeah?
Yes, so Free Gaza, I read about it somewhere. I heard about this idea, and keeping in mind I'd already done Human Shield, so I understand the power of people in direct action. Nonviolent direct action can be extremely powerful. So I saw the plan, and I wrote to the organizers and said, brilliant plan, love it, support it in any way I can. If you need a captain, I'm hereby.
You are a captain, actually, yeah?
I'm a U.S. Coast Guard captain, yeah, which I could marry people. I could also have someone walk the plank. If a mutiny is being carried out as a captain, I can literally kill somebody legally, lawfully, come back with my log reports, the guy tried a mutiny. So yes, a proper captain. And I ended up, they said, yeah. So I went and I helped prep these boats for 4 months in Greece before we set off. Nobody thought we would make it. And the Israelis were saying that we were pirates and they would treat us as such. The Western media ignored it, but the Arab media and others followed it. And the bottom line is we sailed from Cyprus to Gaza, never touching Israeli territorial waters, always in international waters, and then coming into the Palestinian territorial waters where they got a bunch of gas that the Israelis want to steal. And we made it. We made it, and I have to say, of all the beautiful experiences I've had in my life, seeing thousands and thousands of Palestinians all coming out in their fishing boats, kids jumping in the water, cheering. I was behind the wheel of the boat, and like all the people are having a great time, but the kids are jumping in. I'm worried about kids getting to the propeller in the back and like chopping up some kid, but I'm also like, it was like winning the Super Bowl or the World Cup, but better. These people had hope. For a moment, they had hope. They knew that they weren't forgotten, that these people here, 46 of us, we cared, we risked our lives, we made it. They didn't think we'd make it, but we did. And that was just such a powerful thing. And when I got there, I listened to what they said. And they said to me, we don't want aid. We need freedom of movement. We need to be able to move in and out, and we need trade. We need to develop our economy so that we can be independent. So that was where Aloha Palestine was born, which married my Hawaiian work with Palestine and trade, not aid.
You encapsulated this little story, if I may call it like this, with precision. And it's, if I think about this, yeah, the actual achievement here, you defied the Israelis, yeah, you actually landed on a beach there with a couple of boats. You brought, what was it that you brought? Humanitarian aid?
Literally, those two boats, and I've been asked versions of this question before. Being human beings, showing that you care, risking your life is a strong form of aid. It says you are not forgotten. We do care about you, and we're sorry. so sorry about what our governments are doing. That is critically important. How do you think the Palestinians feel in Gaza today? Abandoned.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah, the whole world. But the whole world, thank God, is finally starting to see, really.
Yeah. The whole world is forced to see the graphic images that come out of there, which go directly into the subconscious, and it shows also the mental acrobatics our Western politicians have to go through in order to justify what clearly, and that's not my opinion, I have a whole string of academics who confirm in their own words this is a genocide. One of which is Professor Omar Bartov. He's a genocide expert. He's probably the worldwide leading genocide expert, and he says this is genocide based on international law.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been using that word genocide for a long time because the work I did in Hawaii, they're being genocided from day one. From first contact, they had roughly 800,000, 1 million Kanaka Maoli Hawaiians who had already created a sovereign nation. Within the first 100 years of contact, 94% of the population had been wiped out from disease, known diseases that they had no immunity to. So the Hawaiians were nearly genocided. Even that policy remains this day, and I can prove it. So that word genocide is something that I already had in my consciousness before I learned about Palestine and all that. The definition of genocide, which I've memorized, obviously there's some more details, but this is a valid, legal, lawful definition. To destroy in whole or part a national, ethnic, or religious group. To destroy in whole or part a national, ethnic, or religious group. The Palestinians are a national identity. They are Palestinians. And the reality and historic factual knowledge of that is not debatable. So what are who's the only claimant to Israel today? Well, the Israelis claim that, but the only other ones that would have a valid claim would be who? The Palestinians. If there are no Palestinians, now they get it, don't they? So you got to kill them. So to destroy in whole or part, even the forced relocations, they know they'll never get back. This is their last stand, Gaza. It's their last stand. Many of them, and I know such people, I have family in Gaza, man, it's horrendous. They're starving, A lot of them ain't gonna leave. They'll die. They'll die, because they love their land. They love their land, and they want to have something for their children. They're in pure survival mode now. They're going to be starving. There's going to be tens and tens of thousands dead.
We're going to discuss this in more detail. Yeah. Now coming back so we discussed briefly the first flotilla, so to speak. Yeah. Then you mentioned Aloha Palestine,
which was born from that trip, listening to the Palestinians. So Aloha Palestine, it's the blockade. And the blockade goes back to 67 and even before, really. It's not even a 15-year, but no, it goes back. They're being choked off. They live in a concentration camp, literally, by the definition. It's really horrendous, but we could fix it real quick. There are trade agreements that exist between all the European Union member states. And among that is what's known as the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership. Within that partnership, the Eurozone has partners in the Mediterranean region: Lebanon, Syria, Libya, Israel, and the Palestinian territories. Now that translates to billions of euros a year in trade. So the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership involves EU member states. So this is treaty law, this is contracts. It's a multilateral treaty, which is effectively a contract for nations. So within this contract, known as the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the European Union is doing billions and billions a year in trade with Israel. Now, that same agreement applies to all the other partner countries, and including the Palestinian territories. So what I did was I created a company called Aloha Palestine. I registered it with Companies House in the United Kingdom. So that fit as a European-based company. We all know, what's happened over there with Brexit. Still, according to law, that is a European-based company that is doing lawful, peaceful trade with a partner country known as the Palestinian territory. This is a big problem for Israel, because that billions that Europe is gifting Israel, the richest country in the Middle East, it results in a blockade. Tacitly, the European Union is supporting, in law and in economic terms and political terms, the blockade of Gaza. This is a fact. This is a fact. I saw the opportunity there. So what I'm going to do is what a crazy guy like me does. We're going to do trade under the same damn laws you got with Israel. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it for Palestine. The amount of things and challenges I've been through, the amount of things that I've endured as a result of this, because the Israelis know my plan better than my allies. They do, and they know this is a nightmare. Humanitarian aid missions fall under humanitarian law, which is pretty piss poor if you ask me. Trade law is different. The world runs around business. Trade is integral. I use the same damn laws. I studied trade law. Is that my passion? No. But it's what the Palestinians said they needed, so I made myself an expert. Aloha Palestine is still, like I failed there too, but I'd never give up. I'm not. It's there. And I want to break that blockade to pieces.
Speaking of which, in the same year, in 2010, Aloha Palestine, came now the second flotilla, the real one. Yeah. So here I would really like to flesh out a couple of things which, before I started to do research for this interview, were even unknown to me, right? I mean, first of all, I don't claim to know everything anyway, yeah? But I had this superficial image, you know, some crazy guys, you know, engaged with the Israelis somewhere in front of Gaza. Some people died. I saw the official Israeli night vision edited movie clips where it appears that people with long sticks, whatever that was, hit on Israelis who already were on board. Yeah. So I had this classic thing. I had also one misconception. I thought there were a couple of small boats, but actually the boat that you were on, and you told me before this interview, were 600, 700 people on. So it's not a small boat, and there were several of those. Yeah. So I would really like to, your vision here, because how shall I say this? A number of how to phrase this best? A number of key events happened that day, yeah? And most of them, again, following my research, were grossly misinterpreted. Yeah? So now I would like to hear your version. Maybe first of all, you explain what it really was.
Okay.
Again, keeping people in mind who have never heard about you and who are not aware of this flotilla at all.
So the difference between Aloha Palestine and the Freedom Flotilla is the Freedom Flotilla was a humanitarian aid mission. So that falls under the auspice of international law, human rights law, which again is inadequate at best. Thank you, South Africa, but we'll get into that later. This Freedom Flotilla was humanitarian aid. I was very focused on trade, not aid. And I wasn't even going to go. But at the last second, I was like, you know what, this is too big. I was working on Aloha Palestine. I was actually really involved. But at the last second, I decided I got to go. So because people know who I am, I was easily able to get on. And so the mission was to deliver aid to a population which includes 800,000 plus children at that point. It's now 1 million. And I thought, okay, yeah. I thought we would make it, keeping in mind that in 2008, we made it. And I said in an interview with BBC, you know, I did not think the Israelis would be so stupid as to attack a civilian passenger ship on a humanitarian aid mission in international waters trying to help a population of people, including 800,000 children. But they're just that arrogant, boy. And the specifics of what they did was, we were in the international waters. The ship had been inspected completely. There were no weapons on that ship.
In Turkey?
In Turkey, yes.
And who inspected it? I mean, there was the Turkish authorities.
Turkish authorities who have friendly relations, regardless of the public pretenses. They have very friendly relations with Israel. So the Turkish government said it, and the Israelis were even invited to be able to validate and verify, so that they couldn't use the excuse that we're bringing terrorists and bringing in arms and all this.
So it was verified there were no arms whatsoever?
100%. Even before I got on the ship, they said we couldn't bring knives, no knives, because knives could be used in a lethal capacity. So I know, they inspected us, man. Everything that came on that ship was known. So I ended up going. I met the people in Istanbul, and we sailed from down south in Turkey to Cyprus. Everything was going well, and we had our date to go from Cyprus to Gaza, which should take about 11, 12 hours, depending on your speed. And so we did that, and the Israelis timed their attack to the morning prayers.
Were there any warnings from the Israelis prior to the attacks? Were there any?
Well, they said publicly that, you know, we were terrorists, and, you know, that you know, we wouldn't be allowed to make it, and da-da-da-da, all their basic lies. And so, again, this ship was mostly Muslims. It's a Muslim organization, IHH or IHH, and Bülent Yıldırım, who's the leader of IHH, they had initiated this. So I'm like one of the only non-Muslims on the boat. And I had cameras and whatnot, and but they asked me when I joined, they asked, look, do you want to document, or would you prefer to defend the ship? And I said to them, well, look, you've got plenty of media here. They got even better equipment than me, and, you know, I am a Marine. I think I'm more useful defending. So yeah. So they said, okay.
If you said defending, yeah, was there an expectation to be attacked, or
to repel any attempted boarding by the Israelis, so that we make it? Very specifically, we were told before we set off, because everybody knew, of course, there was a real good chance the Israelis were not going to allow this. We were told if we came into contact with the Israelis, if they boarded, we weren't to kill anybody, but we maybe the leadership slightly underestimated how bloody it would get. Because at a certain point, if people are shooting you dead, executing you at point blank range, and I've looked at the ballistics and autopsy reports, I've done the research, and I've done
not so fast, not so fast.
But anyway,
yeah.
So the attack came. My job was at the aft portion of the ship to help repel any boarding from the side.
Which portion? For someone who is not the sailor.
The back of the boat.
Okay.
Yeah, we had an area of responsibility, and I was in a 6-person team, and I was put second in command of that team. So we're heading towards Gaza, 4 o'clock in the morning. That's morning prayers for the Muslims. But we had Jews and Christians on that ship, so they prayed too. I prayed with them, actually, but not at that time. And so they timed it to that. We did see the Israelis. We saw them on our radar, and they had practically the whole Israeli naval fleet out there, literally. So we could see them. You know, they were around us. And but when it came to that time with the morning prayers, that's when they came with the Zodiacs. They closed distance. We could see the ships now clearly around us, and they came with the Zodiacs. And they did what, I'm a Marine, so I know these things. I've done all these things. They were trying to throw grappling hooks. They were able to throw the grappling hooks to get over the top of the ladder, climb up, but we were easily able to repel that. That was part of my job. You know, like when they hooked, unhook it, or, you know, really, we were able to repel it. They were not getting on that way. But then they came with the helicopters. Again, I'm a Marine. What they did was what's called fast roping. So you have a thick rope, you hang it out from the helicopter that's hovering over wherever you want to go down. And with that rope going down to the deck, you grab it with your hands like this, you have gloves with padding, and you use your feet to get the feet around the bottom. The advantage to this is that when you do this and you drop the 30 feet or 40 feet, whatever it is, whatever the distance is, when you get to the bottom, you're off. No disconnect, quick, bam. So you've got your weapon on your shoulder, you've got a sidearm as well. You hold on to that, but as soon as you get down, bam, you're ready. Makes you very dangerous, and I've done this. I've done this in the Marines. So I saw the first helicopter come, and it was brilliant what the guys up there on the top deck did. They took the line, the rope, and they pulled it to the side and attached it to the ship at an angle. You can't come down a rope like that. You can't. So they did this, and they pulled it off to the side. And the Israelis were like, oh, damn it. So they let that rope go, and they put another one down. This one they managed, and I saw the commandos coming down. Now, keep in mind, I'm at the aft back of the ship. They weren't coming on anywhere there. So it was at that point that I said to the team leader, I said, listen, do you mind if I go up there? Because they need help.
If you say up, there were this
To the top
was
deck.
multiple floors, right?
So yeah, I was like 2 decks below on the main deck where the rails to the ship are. So where they were coming was the top deck where they had enough space to be able to drop the rope. So the defenders who were put up on the top were the guys who were engaging now up there. So I asked my team leader and he said, yeah, go ahead. Again, as somebody who knows rank structure, like it's not my job to just go do whatever I want. I have to ask him first, but he was like, yes. When I went up there, it's divine as far as I'm concerned. I should have been dead many times over, but as it turned out, I got up one deck and then I got up to the next deck where I needed to go into a hatch, the internal part where the last stairwell is up to the top. And I got to that deck and I was going into the hatch, and lo and behold, one of the Israeli Commandos had been pushed over that rail and literally fell down right in front of me. And I saw him, and immediately I went for him and I grabbed his 9mm pistol, his 9mm pistol. I took that pistol off of him, and the other brothers inside the ship then grabbed him and pulled him in. I then took that weapon and...
Hold it a second, yeah. So, for me, an Israeli commando, special forces, landing, even one of them, landing on the deck of a ship with civilians, I mean, except you. I'm not assuming the others were former Marines in the army. Yeah?
Well, we were all civilians. We weren't active duty service.
No, but that's not trainings-wise. Yeah?
Yes.
So for you, I understand. You're a former Marine. I can understand you can
Yes.
fight. Yeah. But I'm assuming the rest of the people on the boat, I mean, they were not soldiers, right? They were in civilian occupations.
Well, keep it in mind, we had a lot of women, we had journalists, and we had defenders.
So how did you manage? I mean, again, for me, Israeli special forces, commandos.
Yeah, this is their best.
They are pretty dangerous. Yeah. So how if you create an image, you just said en passant, we pulled him inside. How?
Literally, he fell, and it was just like divine timing, like if I was a few seconds later, he would have fallen, he would have got his pistol, and by the time I got to him, I would have been done. But it worked out to where he fell, and I saw immediately his 9mm. He didn't have a submachine gun. I think they must have gotten it off him up there, but he had his 9mm. And I just seized on it. Like I got to that weapon, I pulled it off him. Now he's defenseless. I
wouldn't call a special ops commander defenseless without weapon.
No.
Krav Maga, they all breathe it.
Yeah, well, the first one you could see, he'd taken a lick or two, and you can see it. I can see fear in someone's eyes. A warrior, no matter how, like someone who's aligned with God, there's no fear, man. You just do what you got to do. It was too much for him, and I was easily able to get that weapon off of him. And the other brothers did come at that point, and so there's like 2 or 3 guys pulling him in. So in that sense, he was relatively defenseless. He was a lot more dangerous with his weapon, let's say. So that happened.
Okay, that was number 1.
Yeah. I took the bullets out of the weapon, and I gave the weapon to some people, and I hid the bullets somewhere because my hope was, and my job was, to defend the ship so we could deliver this aid and help these people in Gaza. And so I was very focused on that. For me, that was evidence. And I had already seen one dead body at that point, a man who was shot, a journalist, right here. Perfect.
That was prior?
Prior to the first one I had seen.
When did the Israelis start to shoot?
So when they came, this is another thing they lied about.
Because there's exactly, that's why I'm asking, because the myth is they actually started only shooting once you disarmed them.
That's a lie, and easily proven wrong. Another important point is there were a lot of video. In fact, somebody shot video of me disarming that commando, an Al Jazeera reporter, literally. He had footage. They stole all the footage, all of it. Remember, they kidnapped us, took us back to Ashdod, all of the evidence. The only evidence that we've seen, that footage, that was a woman who put it in her private parts, and she managed to get that chip through, and that's why we have that footage. They took everything else, including the footage of me disarming one of those commandos. So I have an Al Jazeera reporter who videotaped it, who will validate, and I have other witnesses as well. They were shooting at us before They were dropping percussion grenades. For those that don't know what that is, a fragmentation grenade is the one that blows up and it sends shrapnel and it can blow you apart, take off your legs, do all sorts of stuff. Percussion grenades, although not generally as lethal, they can kill you too. If you're right next to a percussion, the percussion, that will make you go deaf, it'll blow out your eardrums, it'll disorient you. So they were using those, which causes confusion, chaos, and they were shooting. They had laser-guided rifles. I'm also a sniper.
So they were shooting already?
From the helicopters,
okay.
They were shooting. Again, all provable. Even without the evidence they stole, provable. And
you say provable because of the bullet holes which were verified on the deck of the boat and the trajectory of the bullets.
yes, plus we have, you can't discount all the witnesses who verify the fact that before they even stepped foot on that, we had dead people. How did they die? How? If you were using paintballs, they said, right? They did use paintballs, and they used live rounds. So that's how you can lie, right? We used paintballs. You're just omitting the fact that you had live rounds or denying it. That's a lie. You did, and you killed people, including an American,
I think there's no question. I think there's no question. So 9 people died that day, and the 10th later in the hospital. Yeah.
Yes, he was in a coma from the...
Okay, but bullet wounds are bullet wounds. I mean, there's no debating.
No, so they were shooting at us and killing with sniper rifles from their comfortable position on a helicopter.
So again, that was prior to you disarming Special Commandos.
Yes, and actually, a little detail of the story, after I took that 9mm pistol, I was actually trying to figure out what to do with the weapon. It was evidence. I believe in law. This is evidence. We would have ballistics capacity to see if this gun fired any bullet that went into the body of one of the dead people. If you believe in law, that's important. You don't throw that away. You need that evidence. I still hope that we could make it. While I was carrying this weapon in a safe position like this, the Israelis were firing from the helicopters, and I saw the lasers near me, literally, like the laser was like there. You know what that laser means? If that's on you, whoa, that's a problem. You're 1 second away from being a dead man real quick. So I literally, I was carrying this weapon, and I heard the ricochet of a bullet right now. So they took a shot, and it didn't get me, but it was close, real close. And I was like, Ken, Jesus Christ, you're a Marine. Get down, man. Get in a low position. Be a Marine. You need to avoid getting hit here. I got rid of the weapon, and then I saw more dead bodies in the course of that. So after I got rid of the weapon, they were still attacking. So I went back up. The same place I went, just the opposite side of the ship, the same exact place at the hatch where I needed to go to get up to the top. And I swear to God, the same thing happened again. So this time, an Israeli commando who had his full wits about him, he was fully capable, and he had a submachine gun shoulder strapped. He fell down. The timing was perfect again, because he was well aware. He fell to the ground, and of course, the first thing he's doing is going to get to his weapon. And I saw him, I went to him, and I literally grabbed his hands. So he's taking his right hand to get it in the pistol grip, to get it in the trigger position, and then the left hand to hold the stock. I'm a Marine, I know how this works. I immediately went to his hands, and I was able to get to his hands and pry them. Now, if I had been 2 seconds later, he would have had it, swung it around, I'd be dead. But the timing was perfect. I got there, I started peeling his hands off of the weapon. Another brother came, a Turkish man. He came, and he was trying to get the weapon. I said, it's strapped. I told him, get it off in that way, pull the strap off. He did. After I pried his hands off, he pulled the weapon, was taken inside. I think they threw it in the water.
Describe taken inside. I mean, he just...
They actually, that weapon I do know was thrown in the water. They threw it in the water.
But the soldier was taken inside.
So what happened with that one was, I pried his hands off. The other brother took the weapon, and then that was thrown in the water. And I also got in a tangle with that one. I gave him a little straight right to the face. I was angry at that point. I could have killed both of them. Keep that in mind. So I had a 9mm pistol loaded with real bullets. I could have easily taken that and killed him right then and there. I did, but initially I had that weapon and it was loaded. I took the bullets out. The second one, I could have killed him too. I could have. Those two Israeli commandos owe their life to me. I disarmed them. They were murdering people. And yet this flipped up inverted world of ours, if you go to Wikipedia, because of someone named Greta Berlin, and I will name her, you poisonous woman, implying that I'm responsible for the death of these people. You weren't even on that ship, Greta. You weren't even on that ship. I defended that ship. If anything, I saved life. What do you want me to do? Lie down? We were supposed to defend the ship, to deliver aid. Shame on you for even saying such a thing. But this is the activist scene, full of idiots and agents who pretend as if they're serving the cause that they say, but secretly they're doing another agenda. Anyway, the bottom line is, the second one, we disarmed him. He was taken inside. And shortly after that happened, the captain came down over the PA. He said, stop resisting, they've taken over the bridge. So the Israelis had gotten to the bridge.
But there were 3 Israeli soldiers captured, right, on this boat?
3 of them, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I did too.
Okay.
The captain said, stop resisting. I'm a captain. You follow the captain's orders. So we did. And they said, come in the interior of the ship. And
how many of those, let's say 650 or so people on board were actually involved in?
So I think the exact number is somewhere between probably around 150, roughly. Because again, we had a lot of women, we had journalists, we had older people who weren't really fit for defending. So it was the younger, more able-bodied, even though I was like 50.
While the fighting was going on, where were the rest of the people? There were 400 people, they must have been scared. Where were they?
Just to be correct, I was in my 40s. Yeah, well, you know what I saw on the Mavi Marmara, a unity of purpose, Muslim, Christian, Jews even, on that ship. We all had the same desire to help the people of Palestine in Gaza. We really did. And it was beautiful. It was an honor and a blessing to be with people who really did and were willing to put their lives on the line. This was the basis of my Human Shield action. Protests and petitions are not enough. We have to do more if we're serious. Obviously, that's not for everybody. Not everybody's willing to risk their life. But for those of us who have that kind of will and capacity, we need to. We need to. This is not a safety safe. You know, isn't it all about safety for your safety? You know what? Sometimes we have to take big risks. And if I've been blessed, it's been the blessing of a fearlessness based on a love of humanity and this planet and a willingness to die if necessary, because there's no way around it. But that's the leaders of movements who do this sort of stuff. But we are meant to inspire others, to raise people and create new leaders. You know, that's what I would love to do, and I know I have. You know, people have been inspired by my actions, my will, and out of that you get people inspired who emulate you in some form or fashion, and they can become the great leaders of the future.
Okay, so the captain ordered everybody to resist, stop resisting, yeah? And then?
So then they separated men from women, and they had all of us able-bodied men and all the men.
Did you immediately release those 3 Israeli soldiers, or was that?
So that was a decision made by the head of the action and the captain. And they released the 3. Like, I didn't necessarily agree with that, but the converse argument would be if we didn't release them, the whole ship might have been killed, which again, I still say, then maybe that's the way it should have been. Because you can imagine,
whoa, that's
if 700 plus of us and that ship were taken out, can you imagine? That would be the story. And it would be a big sacrifice, 700 people, but we're talking about 2 million people in Gaza.
You just made a lot of friends
really?
With that statement.
Really, I mean, you know, if we're not willing to risk our lives, then I call BS, man. If you're serious about a better world, there are safer ways. There are things you can do. Share social media, you know, go to a protest, you know, sign a petition, fine. But that's the bare minimum. Don't be patting yourself on the back because you went to a protest, which is more of a social gathering than anything else. Everybody pats each other on the back. Oh, we're the good guys. And you just content to complain about a government that represents you by genociding and facilitating genocide. At what point do we hold our leaders to account in a democratic society? And if we're not willing to risk our lives, then the whole world is right to say, you know what? Like Gandhi said, what do you think of Western civilization? He said, I think it's a good idea. Look at the definition of civilized. We are barbaric.
Still,
we are barbaric hypocrites.
I completely get your point of view, yeah, but...
and we call them terrorists.
True.
Inversion.
Yeah. So...
By the way, my people, the Irish, were terrorists too. The Irish Republican Army. So that's we know genocide.
Which is why the Irish are one of the few who are supporting Palestine.
God bless the Irish there. The government can go to hell, but the people, God bless them.
Good, but coming back to the flotilla, you stopped resisting, or so the whole boat stopped resisting?
Yes, everybody
and
followed the order.
How did it continue?
So they took control of the ship, they separated men from women, they put us out on the deck area. So keep in mind, this is summertime, it's Mediterranean, it's hot, and it took, I think about, God, what was it? At least 7-8 hours or something. We were actually in stress positions on the deck for probably about 10 hours total.
So all the 650 people, how do I need to picture?
The women were inside and contained together in there, but the men were outside in stress positions, not allowed to move. I remember watching the Israelis. I mean, I've known this for a long time, but they're really just so comfortable with lying. So we had elderly people, right, you know, who weren't in the greatest of health. You're now putting them in stress positions after people have been murdered. We're out in the open sun in the Mediterranean, and people needed to use the toilet, and they would say, please, you know, and they would say, yes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And you'd believe they were lying. They just lie so easy. Like really, it's just like built into the fabric of these people.
So there were dead people laying around, and you...
The dead bodies, those, ultimately they separated. But, you know, I saw many of the dead bodies myself. And so the men are outside, the women are inside. They were lying about being able to use the toilet, so people were wetting themselves. And you know, eventually we got to Ashdod. So they kidnapped us and took us to Ashdod in Israel.
And to be clear, this whole incident happened in international waters. There's no dispute about this, right?
No dispute whatsoever. And according to law, I mean, they attacked, think about it. Remember the Somalian pirates? Remember that? I mean, in the Hard Talk interview, I said, we've heard so much about Somali pirates. What about the Israeli pirates? If we understand law, that's piracy. That's international piracy, what they did. Absolutely. They have no right to do that. But Israel operates with impunity. Only now do we see genocide charges, finally. They should have been lodged 75 years ago. The creation of Israel was built on a genocidal policy that was unfair and allocated a recent population of immigrants with a Bolshevik background to then genocide the Palestinians. And it's taken us 75 plus years to get to a genocide charge. Law is not functioning. Impunity in the nuclear age is suicide. And this is why people need to realize nobody likes to talk politics. Very few invest in real knowledge of law. Many Americans don't know their own constitution. Many Brits don't know their Bill of Rights. Most Europeans just think that mandates are laws. Why are we so infantile in our understanding of law, history?
And I think it's even getting worse. I mean, you can look up on YouTube. You have plenty of those interviews, or you know, when they ask college students on the streets, yeah, against whom did America fight the War of Independence, and they're saying, Mexico. You know, I mean, and one could even go a step further. I mean, since we no longer need educated and healthy people in the fabrics and on the battlefield.
Yeah, it's
the
really...
money dries up for education, for healthcare. So you might speculate, and again, it's speculation, that there might be some inadvertent purpose in that, right? Uninformed people are easier to guide.
Oh, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. So we have a fake history, we have a fake media, we have fake academics too, teaching fake everything.
Yeah, and
that's not to say there aren't good professors.
And if they don't, they get fired. Yes.
Yes, yes. If you even touch Israel, no matter how valid, correct, verifiable your facts are, your career will be destroyed. How many people? We have a long list. The reason why they have not been able to completely destroy me, although I've lost everything I own 3 times in the last 10 years alone, is because I'm independent and I can live on the street if I have to. I'm a tough guy. I'm willing to pay any price. You ain't gonna cow me. You ain't gonna intimidate me. You ain't gonna buy me. You're not gonna honey trap me. You're not gonna do any of these things because I have a mission. That mission takes precedence over everything else in my life. And those who love me, like, you know, they see this public guy they love, like in terms of relationships and whatnot, I'm a freaking nightmare. I bring danger to the family. I bring attention that you don't want. I bring all sorts of headaches, and I'm focused. Always I'm aware. You know, it doesn't mean I don't have a good time. I had a good time last night, up till 4 o'clock here in Amsterdam. We need to release and have fun and laugh and do these types of things, but I am focused. I will die in pursuit of a better world. I want to feel good about handing this world to our kids. Right now, anybody who thinks that, I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what gated community you live in. I don't care what trust fund you set up for your kids. We on this planet are tempting total self-destruction. We are in World War III right now. We're only 1 or 2 moments away from full scale. At that point, people are going to realize, oh wow, why do we wait till crisis? Why? When the writing is on the wall, read it, deal with it.
We will discuss this in a moment, yeah, because I think you're making some very valid points in regards to what's going on right now and how it's not reaching the public, yeah. But coming back to the flotilla, yeah. So I'm keeping on this track because I have a very vivid picture of in my mind, which I saw in what was a documentary, I believe, about you, where your head looks like you have been hit a couple of times with a machete, yeah, totally bloody. Yeah, so there were some costs on your end too. So it's not so that you came out of this unscathed, right?
Yeah, there is more to the story. There is definitely more to the story. I mean, if you want to hear the rest of it in a fairly abbreviated way, after they kidnapped us, now little.
So these were not battle wounds. This was not, the Israeli soldiers on the boat defending themselves.
No, I wasn't bloodied
those
yet.
Two, yeah. So
I wasn't bloodied yet.
There was a different cause for your.
No. It was the same event.
I know.
But later.
It was not defensive wounds from those disarmaments that you executed.
No.
Okay.
No, didn't incur any damage there. Okay. It was an incarceration that I experienced some damage. So shall I tell that story? Okay, so they kidnap us and take us to Ashdod. They had built a prison, literally, because they knew we were coming, right? They built a prison. It was brand new. It was for us, literally. So we moved into this brand new prison, right? Very quickly, the Israelis realized, like we have today, the PR for this, it's not looking good. It's a bad look. We got a humanitarian aid mission. Now we got 10 dead people. My family thought I was dead for sure because when they gave reports about who had been taken back to port, there was no report of an Irishman. I had my Irish passport, but I also had a Palestinian passport that had been given to me by Ismail Haniyeh, the prime minister, the democratically elected prime minister personally, gave me this. And
Prime Minister of
Palestine. Remember, they had elections back in 2007. Hamas won democratically, indisputably. Even Carter, Jimmy Carter, former president, said that was that's like a valid vote. That's what they voted for. They haven't had elections since. That's a whole other subject, and that's basically because of the Israelis. But
this is why Netanyahu today claims everybody, there are no innocent. I mean, it was also Herzog, yeah? There are no innocent Gazans. They're all Hamas. They voted them. Yeah, that was 2006. But since then, there were no more elections.
If we apply that logic to us, then we're all guilty of war crimes, because isn't that our democratically elected representatives doing this stuff? So we're guilty. So I don't disagree with him there, except what is Hamas? I mean, I've lived in Gaza. They're bureaucrats, most of them. They do social services, garbage pickup, water when they can supply it, when they're not being bombed. It's only a small portion of the Hamas that are actual fighters. And, you know, I've met these guys from the leader all the way down to the guy on the ground.
It was said you were on this flotilla to train Hamas commandos, right?
Yeah, I was going to Gaza to form and train a commando unit for Hamas, according to the Israeli offensive forces. Defense forces. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't do that, but I get a chuckle out of it. That wasn't my job. And I think we all can see quite clearly that Hamas is pretty good at their commando.
But if you finish your story.
So,
your bloody story.
I had a Palestinian passport. I hid my Irish passport. They stole everything on the ship, all the footage, everything. I had cameras, I had MacBook Pro, blah, blah, blah. I hid that, and I had my Palestinian passport. When we were deboarding the ship, right, we pulled into port, you've got the ramp, and I'm walking.
Handcuffed, free?
No, we weren't cuffed. We weren't cuffed at that point. I was walking off the ship, and there was an Israeli soldier, IDF guy. He looked at me with this smarmy little, cocky little look on his face. He said, "We know who you are." And I literally, with a smile, was like, "I know who you are." Like that. He got pissed. So I walk off the ship, and they had a desk with all the IDF guys processing us to identify who's who. So we were meant to hand over our identification so they could verify. Of course, they put us all on a list, right? And it was priceless, this moment. I'll write about it someday, but basically I got there, and I've got my Palestinian passport, right? And I get there, and there's one Israeli guy who's sort of like doing some paperwork, and then another guy, he's the one taking the form, or the identification, and his passport. So I come up and I hand my Palestinian passport. And the other guy and him were like, wait. And I said, yes, actually you guys kidnapped me, so when you deport me to Gaza. There's my passport. So they process us in Ashdod, and then they deliver us to this brand new prison. At that point, they were in damage control mode. And my family thought I was dead because I handed over the Palestinian passport.
So the news was already leaking out, right?
There was news from the beginning, but they blacked it out. They cut off, that's one of the things they did, jammed all of our signals, they stole all the footage. If all that footage was retained, oh my God. I know the truth, I was there, but my family thought I was dead because I handed over the Palestinian passport, so there was no record of an Irish. So they really thought I was dead. And so they took us to Ashdod, to this prison. We're all in there. They're in damage control because it's not looking good. It's not looking good. Information is slowly coming out. People are trying to figure out. That was the top story for a day or two. And so they realized, like, dude, we got to get these people out of here quick. So they said, get them out, deport them all. Now, at that time, it was me in that prison, and I'm just a crazy, crazy guy. But I'm also a very tactical guy. I'm not stupid, but I am crazy by most people's definition. I was like, no, I'm not leaving. I want my Israeli justice. Now the Turks are different. They will get a different treatment than me. But I knew, as long as I'm here in your custody, that's going to bring attention to the issue of Palestine. And it's also going to reveal some of that work I did but previous to this. And none of this is good for you, Israel. None of it. So anyway, we're in the prison, and everybody's gone. And they came to us and said, okay, you know, two guys in one prison, we're going to move you to a new location. They lied, as they do. And they ended up taking us to Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport, where we saw everybody there. And they're like, oh, he's back. I was like, yeah, they lied, man. They said, and so we regrouped at the airport.
But how did you end up so bloody?
This is coming now, yeah. So I get to the airport, regroup with the crew and you know, the captain and the head, Bulent Yildirim. And we're there, and there's a guy named Paul Arudi. He was on another boat, one of the little ones, and he was roughed up. You could see he had a bit of a black eye, and they were manhandling him in Ben Gurion Airport in the secure area where they had us, right? And we could see him. And he was like saying, stop, stop, and like, yeah, he was obviously injured. And all of us rose up and we're like, stop, stop, let him go. And the police, the Israeli police came and were like saying, sit down, and we're like, no, leave him. And they came up to us, and I was kind of right there in the center, right next to the captain and the head of IHH, or IHH. And it got to a point where they were like, not only was I refusing, I was using expletives and basically telling them to shove it where the sun don't shine and stop. And one of the Israelis, policemen, took out a baton and he whacked me on the head. So that's, for anybody who's not had a cut to the head, when you get cut, and it didn't do anything, it just pissed me off even more. And literally said, is that it? Really, coward, coward. So I've got blood streaming down my face. I'm not backing down. I'm still coming forward. And that's when they grabbed me. They were kicking me and punching me. A guy got me in a chokehold. I'm also a mixed martial artist, so you get in a chokehold, that's not, once that's locked in, you've got very few ways to get out of that. So I couldn't breathe. I'm being kicked and punched. They throw me to the ground. They get on top of me. I'm still resisting, but I hadn't breathed for several seconds. Plus the adrenaline's flowing, the oxygen's running out, and I could feel like I'm gonna black out, man. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if this guy's gonna let go. I really didn't know, am I gonna make it or not? And at the last second, I went limp. I went limp, because it's like, just before I was gonna black out. And to this Israeli policeman's credit, although he would have had orders, like this would have been a problem if they choked me out in front of a bunch of witnesses and killed me. He let go, so thank you, Mr. Israeli policeman. But I was beaten at that point now. I'd been kicked, punched, hit in the ribs, like really, the wounds that you didn't see, but you saw that one. And so I'm bleeding like a stuck pig, and they knew like, oh, this is a problem, plus we got all these witnesses. Again, everything I just explained to you, that's all been witnessed by multiple people. We're talking dozens, including the captain and whatnot. So they took me aside, and they were like, trying to like, I think the guys on the ground were getting some crap from their higher-ups, like, what the hell are you doing? This is already a PR disaster. We really don't need this. And so I had this blood on my face, and basically they put everybody on the plane, but they weren't able to send me, like, because I had this blood on my face, and this is a problem. So everybody left. The last they see of me is bloody in the custody of the Israelis. Now I'm the only one there. I'm literally the only one there. The only other ones that were there were injured, were in hospitals, and they hadn't been able to relocate them or repatriate them back to Turkey. So I'm the only guy there, I'm bloodied, and everybody's gone, right? And at that point, they put me in a cell, and they didn't want to send me right then anyway. They really didn't, because it was all fresh in everybody's mind. Again, they wanted to try and contain it. And so everybody leaves, I'm in a jail, and that's where another thing happens, where I actually got beaten again. They were trying to play games with me in the jail and being real cocky and doing this, that, and the other. But you can't intimidate me, and I'm not crazy. I don't mean it in a literal sense, but like I do things that would be considered crazy, and I let them know, like one of these. But
at the end, they just kick you out.
So one of these guys instigated some crap with me, and I told him what's not. And they literally hogtied me. So for those that don't know, when you get handcuffed and those cuffs are put together, then you can't move, really. But you do that behind the back, and then you do ankle cuffs, and then you take those ankle cuffs and you connect the cuffs back here behind your back, so you are completely helpless, totally helpless. So I'm hogtied in the cell, and one of these guys beat me a bit more. And he literally pulled out his penis. I'm not making this up. He pulled out his penis and put it in front of me. And I literally said to him, you put that near my mouth, you ain't getting it back. Like, I don't care what you do, like, but you definitely don't want to put that in my mouth or anywhere near it. So he stopped doing that. And the commandant of the Ben Gurion facility he got wind of it. I'm not making this up. So this is becoming more and more of a problem now. I've got blood on my face, and I've been beaten. I've got my Aloha Palestine shirt. Literally, you see, it's Aloha Palestine. And the commandant calls me in, and I swear to God, saw all his Zionist awards and all this stuff, right? The Star of Remphan David, their satanic star. Anyway, and the guy literally kissed my ass. So now I've got the commandant of the Israeli jail kissing my butt, saying, you know, would you like some coffee or tea, cappuccino, or literally, I'm like, yeah, some coffee will be good, thanks. And he sat down and he said, you know, basically kind of apologized and said, you know, we want to rectify this, and really very sorry. And that's where they asked me, like, you know, here, can we wash your face? They tried to wash my face. I'm like, no, get away, you know, no. And they were practically begging me, to the point they actually got the Irish ambassador to Israel to get on the phone and personally ask me, please, wipe your face. And I said, with all due respect, no. All I have now, they've stolen everything. All I have now is my bloody clothes, this blood on my face, and I'm keeping it. It's mine. So he didn't succeed. So they were basically forced, and I was put on that Turkish Airlines flight. It was so funny. I've got blood all over me. I'm stinky. I haven't had a shower for days. Blood all over me, blood on my face. And they put me in first, and I'm in first class. All these passengers who were flying from like Tel Aviv to Turkey are walking past this bloody, stinky guy in first class. They were really nice. They gave me a couple drinks and so on and so forth. So when I got to Istanbul, that's when I then found out that the Israelis say I'm a terrorist. I'm a terrorist. I didn't kill them.
When did you really, I mean, to conclude this topic, when did you really realize the gravity? When did you realize, I mean, you knew from the beginning there were people dying, they were shot.
Oh, yeah.
But when did you realize the whole scope of the attack?
See, my history, I've studied I'm an old school activist. Like, I'm not the activist who like blocks roadways and pisses everybody off just to get attention. I use things that inspire people, but I'm very aware of the media. We must manipulate the media in a positive way to get a message out that is inspiring. So I'm very aware of that. So I knew this is problematic for you. There's 10 dead people now. This has brought a lot of attention to a subject that most don't know anything about. And even the most brainwashed person is going to feel a little bit of sensitivity, given the fact that we've got a whole bunch of children in Gaza and they're captive and we're trying to help and now we're dead. And, you know, and it also helped teach people about law and, you know, they were pirates. I said it in the Hard Talk interview. We've heard so much about Somali pirates. What about the Israeli pirates? Impunity is the problem. No accountability for law. It's one law for them, another one for us.
Okay, but the question was, when did you realize the gravity? When did you really
I knew it. I knew it as it was happening. I even said again in the Hard Talk interview, I did not think the Israelis would be so stupid as to attack a civilian passenger ship on a humanitarian aid mission delivering much needed aid to a population that includes 800,000 children. But they are that stupid and cocky. So they did. And that was a penultimate event. And I knew we need to be willing to die. You know, and that ship, as I said, we had no violent intentions. We could have killed those that we disarmed. I could have done it personally. I chose not to. I don't want to kill anybody. But if I have to defend myself, I would. But I didn't have to. I had taken away the weapon that was the threat to my life, which meant he could be subdued now.
You just said something. So we have one more topic on your CV that I really would like to cover. That's the March of Return. But we come to that in a second because you just said something that triggered a thought. The reason that we are sitting here basically is a resurfaced interview that you gave where you very vocal in terms of what you would do if, for example, a foreign power from the other side of the world invades America or Ireland. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll let you elaborate. You do know which interview I'm referring to, right?
Yes. Okay. I have
Maybe,
said it in more than one interview, but that's the one that most people know, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe tell us a bit the context about this interview and then maybe also elaborate on your point of view that you were there.
That's a good question. And what I did was, everybody who has ever mentioned Hamas, and only recently have we started to see this change just a bit, actually substantially. Hamas terrorist, that's it, period, end of story, no conversation.
It's even wider than that. Palestinian is like synonymous with terrorism.
Yes,
No.
the Irish were too. The Irish were too. So again, this is personal. Despite the Yank accent, I am a Celt. My grandmother was born and raised in Ireland. I'm Irish. I'm a Celt. We're always up for a scrap. And we don't like bullies. So, with regard to, I knew, like, in terms of PR and raising awareness, this was a great, great, great achievement. Sadly, it has not yet, to this day, resulted in the breaking of that blockade.
But the context of this interview was?
The point that I was making there is that, well, very common saying, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Many who, and I made the point, so if we look at the founding fathers of America, well, they're heroes to Americans. But what were they to King George III? What were they to the British Empire? Were they heroes? No, they were terrorists. They were the terrorists of their day. They involved in violent resistance against a non-representative government halfway across the ocean there with taxes that don't represent the will of the people there, so they resisted with violence. Are they terrorists? Oh, and let's look at the Palestinians. So they are dispossessed of most of their nation, historic Palestine. They're pushed to the margins. They're completely occupied in the West Bank. And in Gaza, they're in a concentration camp. Are we to believe that these people are supposed to lie down and just accept their own demise? Or do we resist? If Americans were treated in such a way, would we consider them terrorists if they lashed out with violence in whatever form? No, of course not. What happens when we drop bombs, like carpet bombing Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, Iraq? What do we call that? Collateral damage? No, that's terrorism, is what it is. It's predictable loss of life. It terrorizes the people. I know children in Gaza, parents who've told me, they hear a helicopter, to understand. If we hear a helicopter fly overhead, kids here, they're like, oh, look at the helicopter. In Gaza, when they hear a jet or a helicopter, they're getting flashbacks. They're getting flashbacks to bombs that have dropped, people who've been blown apart, blood spilled, and the idea maybe that it's going to come, it's going to hit their building. They wet their beds, they're panicky, they're freaking out, they're traumatized, and this just happens all the time. And what can you do as a parent? You can't protect your child. You can't. You can't even provide for them. You have to live on aid. Now they've cut off UNRWA, too. That's another subject. So the trauma that happens is the terrorism that is the worst terrorism of all is state-sponsored terrorism. Because it's a state government and a military, it's not possible to terrorize. The firebombing of Dresden is terrorism. The firebombing of Hamburg, Berlin, Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, these are all terrorist acts. But because it's a government, oh no, it's collateral damage. So why is it one rule for us and then another rule for the oppressed? This is hypocrisy. It doesn't fly in any real, meaningful, journalistic integrity. It would be easily destroyed, but if you control the media, if you control the money, if you control the politicians, you control academia, you largely control the corporations, you can do this. And only if you have representatives that are compromised could you maintain this lie as long as they have. But because of this slaughter, we see now an awakening that is thrusting the truth, the reality in people's faces because they're so arrogant. They believe they can do whatever they want. And they do treat the Palestinians as animals, worse than animals. I've seen it. I was saying genocide 15 years ago. Thank God we can discuss this now without the immediate anti-Semite BS.
There's an interesting context here, especially in Amsterdam, for two reasons, for a double-sided reason, right? On one side, in the very city of Amsterdam during the Second World War, more Jews were killed than anywhere else in the world on a percentage level, right? Like 98%, something like this. So a very high percent of Jews in Amsterdam were killed because the Dutch cooperated with the Germans, yeah? On the other side, you have Dutch resistance to the German occupation, right? So you would think that here in the Netherlands, there is a clearer image on what it means to be suppressed, like the Irish, right? But at least in the government, and more we have to make this distinction between government and the people, because there is a gap that's widening, right? So at least from government side, the Dutch government is completely aligned with Israel, of course, right? Trying to do damage control now after the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson just, I think, 3 days ago, right?
The criminality of our governments, the hypocrisy, the duplicity, that I won't dispute. Conveniently, I don't know, I mean, any critical analysis of history and the way the world works makes you realize real quick, we're living in 1984. We are living 1984, true to speak.
And we don't have to revert back to opinion, because according to international law, what happens are war crimes, right? So, one more topic I really would like to cover, March of Return. And I came across this again via a film on YouTube where you are in the midst of it, where the dead bodies were literally being carried next to you away. So tell us how you came there and what happened there.
So,
maybe first, what was it? March of Return, for those who don't know, what was that?
every year on the day that the Israelis celebrate their independence, on the other side, depending on what version of history you're into, they have what they call the Nakba, the great disaster, the catastrophe, where they were. Palestinians were put in ovens alive. This is not an exaggeration. And other heinous crimes were committed. So on that day, they have what's known as the Great March of Return. Now, according to law, international...
A march from where to where?
So it's a symbolic march because they can't march back to their land. It's been stolen. But if you believe in law, and I do, if you believe in law, the law is very clear. The Palestinian refugees have a right of return. What does that mean? To return to Gaza? No. To return to Jaffa, Haifa. You know, these areas were Palestinian. This is a fact. So, according to law, what they do symbolically every year on the day Israel is celebrating, they are actually educating the world, whether they listen or not is up to them, that according to the right of return, the law supports their ability to go back. They hold up keys. They hold up keys. These keys are the keys to the homes they used to have in Jaffa or Haifa or Tel Aviv.
They still have the paper deeds and the keys of the...
Many do. Yeah. Many do, yes. And they have the key, so they carry the key. You know, and sometimes they have an actual physical key.
For the front doors of the houses.
A version of the key.
Yes.
So I was there at that time, and I think it's fair to say that I was also providing a level of sort of hope for the Palestinians, because the presence of us foreign nationals putting our lives on the line as well, reporting honestly when the media won't, it gives some hope, you know. So I think the numbers were very big that year. There was a lot of people there, and yeah. I was going, for sure.
I heard, I don't know if the number is correct, I heard about 10,000 people or more. So it's huge. It was not just a couple of hundred or so, it was really huge.
Yeah, and if we could look at the actual data of how many people were there that year as opposed to other years, it was definitely a bigger year. And so the way they did it was the gate...
It was in 2011, yeah?
Yes. There's a gate up in the north of Gaza. I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it, damn it. It's a well-known checkpoint, damn it. It's the one in the north. It's not the one in the south. Anyway, I had been there before anyway. I knew the area. In fact, I had done stuff with others where we go into the area that's, you know, the buffer zone. And I've been shot at. I've got video of, there's another one. I have video. You can hear the bullet going by. And I said, oh, that's a real bullet, man. Whoa. You can hear bullets like whiz by. They make a very distinct sound. You'll remember it. Anyway, so I was there on that day, and most of the people were marching only so far. because we were going literally right up to the very gate where they have a big 24-foot wall. They have guard towers, snipers. They have total control of this area. So I went all the way up to the front. We're not even 50 meters away from a sniper. They're looking down at us, and plus they're like one-way windows, so they can see us, but we can't really see them. But they had snipers in other areas, and they were pot-shotting here, there, and everywhere. Palestinians were climbing up an antenna, putting flags and getting shot, and so I'm documenting. I'm a proper journalist. Where's my frickin' Pulitzer Prize, you know? Real journalism is not rewarded. That's why I call them the prostitutes of propaganda, professional liars. Anyway, they were shooting, and invariably, like, people were praying, they were chanting. There was absolutely nothing violent on the Palestinian side, nothing. This was a non-violent protest demonstrating their lawful right to return. And the Israelis started shooting, and before you know it, you know, somebody got shot near me. Keep in mind, I'm the only white guy there. None of the other media, none of them. This is a dangerous area we're in. They could take out any one of us. I said it in the video I did. I'm a Marine, and from that distance, I could easily hit someone between the eyes. If they stand still for just a few moments, easy, no problem. I could hit you from 300 meters, no problem. 500 meters, I could hit you. From 25, 50 meters, not a problem. So they're shooting people, and it's a mix, and I'm filming. It's a mix of shots that will debilitate you. Like, you know, if you hit somebody in a kneecap or in a major bone, like, that's not something that's just gonna heal and you're gonna be fine. That's gonna debilitate you for life. So there's different ways that they do this. I know of shooting in the crotch. Your procreation is probably gonna stop if you survive. Just really obscene things. I know of a Palestinian football player. He was on the national team. The Israelis got hold of him, and they shot him several times in both feet, ended his football career. So they do this kind of stuff. Like I said, they treat them, they're not even animals, they're subhuman. They have no conscience about it. They actually enjoy it, and we have many videos that show this. So they're shooting people, and I'm filming, and I remember while they were, you could hear the bullets going, you can hear it, you can hear them.
I saw it on the video clip.
And I'm like standing, and this is like, again, where people could say I'm crazy, or I've got a death wish, or I want to be a martyr, and it's like, no, none of those things are true.
Now that you mention it, death wish, if I saw this video, really, the bullets are flying, and they carry literally the people who got shot right next to you out of the masses. Yeah?
I think this is, you know, I have admired some great historic figures that were fearless, that did not flinch in the face of almost certain death. I have these qualities too. I don't flinch. When I'm engaged in something like this, and I've been on many things where the life is on the line, I'm focused like a laser. All I see is a mission. Anything and everything that I must do without compromising my soul and my spirit, I will do to carry out that mission. It's the Marine in me. We have a mission, achieve it, or die trying. So when I get in those zones, I'm very focused and I'm very fearless. And I also know that if they shoot me dead, there will be good that will come. How much? I don't know. But all of the work that I would have done previous to that would have been much exposed, like Tom Herndal or Rachel Corrie, like these people.
There was the lady who got bulldozed over, right? Yeah, alive, buried by Israeli bulldozer, protecting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the sacrifice that these people have made, well, they made history. They're in history. You know, ask the parents, would they rather have their daughter back without the history? I'm sure they would, but they love their daughter, and, you know, as much as they miss her, they love her. And I admire that, you know, I admire that in people, and only so many of us have this kind of strength. So my job is to document this, to show the world this is the truth. So I can't rightfully do that if I'm afraid and I'm running for cover. I gotta be there. And when other people are down, also I have the ability to inspire the Palestinians too. For a white man to be standing square, filming himself and calling the Israelis cowards, you're cowards, Israel. Not backing down, it helps embolden others. Not that they have a lack of courage, they do, they have plenty of it. But hey, we can feed each other in that regard. So I don't have a death wish. I love life. I'm a happy guy. I sleep well at night. I'm fit.
You said you want to document things, yeah, but documentation is only one side of the coin. Then you need to get it out there, yeah. And I saw you have a YouTube account with 70,000 subscribers, which is quite remarkable. But, and now please elaborate, what happened?
So this has become a lot more known in recent history, like shadow banning, censorship, cancel culture, all this stuff. They have been employing that stuff on me at least since 2003, at least. They've used virtually every means to do so. You know, if you look at Wikipedia, I'm linked to David Duke and white supremacy and blah, blah, blah. I've met David. I don't agree with him on many things. I agree with him on other things. Am I a white supremacist? Am I somebody who, no, but they lie. So anyway, yes, this channel, which, you know, if you look at the actual channel, I'm not a guy who ever put the time and made it like my business. Never. In fact, all that work I did.
Organically, yeah.
That stuff that you've seen, I didn't ask a penny for any of that. I've done stuff for the Gypsies in the UK. I've done stuff for the Iraqis in Iraq. I've done stuff for the Palestinians in Palestine. How much did I make from any of this? Zero. How much money did it cost me? Quite a bit. How many risks did I have to take? A lot. Why was I doing it? For humanity, man. For a better world, to hand this over in a better state. Just to finish off on the YouTube thing, for 5 years I've not had access. Ever since I was poisoned, thrown into Bangkok Hilton, tortured, and literally came back from the dead, resurrected and brain damaged. I have not been able to get access to that account, which on average video was getting tens of thousands of videos back then, some over 100K. And I wasn't even doing it like, you know, influencers who want to make a business out of YouTube. First off, they don't say what I say. Secondly, they do it regularly. They provide new content. They engage, like and subscribe. Just look at my stuff. I didn't do that. So that 70,000 would easily be 1 million if I put all my effort into that and had a team. Easy. And I'll do that, no problem.
So so Google still rejects you getting access?
I cannot prove that I am me. YouTube, they know everything about us. They know what you want to shop for. They literally, like, they will customize the ads to you. They know your personality profile, your consumption habits, economically. They know all that, but I cannot prove. Ken O'Keefe, the guy, kind of distinct looking, kind of unique guy, kind of unmistakable. I cannot prove to YouTube that I am Ken O'Keefe because I don't have a damn email or a phone that I had when I got that account started back in 2004 or 3, I think. So yeah, I find it funny. And all it tells me is that when you're being censored and lied about, they're slinging mud your way, and you're doing something right. You're doing something right. If you're being embraced and they're not censoring anything, then you're harmless. And you're probably getting paid by the system. Piers Morgan. There you go. Impartial, right? Yeah, sure thing.
Good. Now we covered the points that I wanted to cover in regards to I wanted to say your main achievements, although some people may have a different opinion in regards to that. Now, I would like to conclude this discussion in a way that maybe characterizes you vis-a-vis what's going on in the world right now. Yeah. So on a geopolitical level, Middle East, Israel, I think let's focus on this area because you're most engaged there. Okay?
Yes, we are at a critical point in history. Irony. The irony is that the Israelis are their own worst enemy. Because of their arrogance, because they have operated with impunity, they attacked the USS Liberty in 1967. Most Americans don't know that.
Maybe it's worth, just to encapsulate a couple of seconds, Liberty, tell us.
So,
because I think it's really not known.
It really is, and in fact, the attack on the Mavi Marmara, where we were attacked, is like identical to where the USS Liberty was attacked. Absolutely fact. So, in 1967, there was the Arab-Israeli war, right? And, they have their narrative, which is BS, but whatever. There was an American spy ship called the USS Liberty, the most decorated ship in the fleet at the time. Now, this ship is basically defenseless. It's a spy ship, so it's got all the best communications, you know, like it can listen in on everybody's conversation. And of course, Israel's our best friend and ally, right? So here we are, the USS Liberty. It was the same time of year, too. It was, in fact, within a few days, the Mavi Marmara from the Liberty, literally, historically. So on a beautiful sunny day in the Mediterranean in June of 1967, this ship was basically spying and listening in on the conversations of the Egyptians who were backed by the Soviet Union, and this was a very dangerous time. But they were also hearing the communications of Israel, including communications that make clear they were committing massive war crimes in what they were doing. So we were hearing that too. Now the Israelis, literally on this day, sunny day, with American sailors and a few Marines, they would fly by so low that USS Liberty survivors like Phil Turney, who's a friend of mine, one of the survivors, and I know others.
Is he still alive?
Yes, he is. He would be a good guest for you. He would indeed. So the Israelis in marked jets with their Star of Remphan.
American jets, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, but they also had French jets, and they have American jets, and they've got their Star of Remphan / David on there. So we obviously knew that they were, Israelis, and the Americans on board were like, hey, and they waved, and literally the pilots waved too. Like you could see the pilot in the cockpit. That's how close they did their runs. So of course the Americans are like, excellent, cool, and then later on, shortly after, the new jets came. These ones were unmarked. So that's a war crime, by the way. If you are a military serving for a nation, you have to identify your weapons of war. So that's a war crime. But when they came back this time, they had a completely coordinated attack. Now, the justification for this attack, according to Israel, and this is the official history, they thought it was an Egyptian ship. Now, this is beyond ridiculous. That ship, on a beautiful sunny day, clearly marked with the U.S. stars and stripes flying abreast, they thought it was Egyptian after flying so close that they were waving to the passenger, the crew. Oh, really? Oh, okay. So they come, and the coordinated attack is such that first thing they did, same thing with the Mavi Marmara, they hit all the communications. Now the Liberty was alone. This was a setup, and we know this. McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense, and Lyndon Baines Johnson, a traitor, had conspired at the executive level. So they sent that ship there, alone. That ship is defenseless. It has like a 50 cal. That is not going to defend the ship against a jet attack and submarines and patrol boats. So anyway, they hit the communications. They cut communications. Same thing they did with the Mavi Marmara.
So to be specific, they fired their rockets at the boat, and they did this for several hours?
They hit it with rockets. They hit it with napalm. They hit it with 50 cal. And the amount of holes, thousands of rounds hit that ship. Thousands. And they took out the communications. So obviously the Americans were like, whoa, what's going on? And because they were unmarked jets, they weren't sure what was happening. But then they could tell, they realized it was the Israelis. Of course, you can imagine what they're like, what the hell is going on? The ship is defenseless. It's a fascinating story, but they keep hitting it, and they hit it with thousands of rounds. They hit it with napalm. It was a heroic effort by the Liberty crew. One guy actually went and ran a wire and put it up and rigged communications, which they managed to get a message to the Sixth Fleet, which was some distance away, but if they sent a ship immediately, and jets. So the message got through to the Sixth Fleet, and this is the only time in U.S. history that a U.S. warship under attack was refused any defense. In fact, the jets had been launched and were heading to defend the Liberty. McNamara himself told the commander of the fleet to bring back the jets. He was basically getting ready to refuse the order of the Secretary of Defense, which is when Lyndon Baines Johnson, a traitor who should have been hung, told him, we're not going to embarrass our ally, America's ally, and basically consigned our own men to death. The actual point of this, and it is divine what happened here, so the jets were launched and then they were called back.
It's a fact, I know.
It's an absolute fact.
It's undisputed.
Indisputable fact. So the ship is hanging out to dry. They then came, like, it was heroic. The ship was listing badly. It had a gaping hole on the port side, was it? I believe port side.
It's on the left side, I know.
Yeah, left side. And it's listing, it's taken on water. So I've been on the ship. Like, you have to close. People were basically locked
clear.
in.
The aim was really to sink this ship, yeah, and to blame it. Yeah.
The proof of this is the level of attack, and most importantly, they came with jets, they came with patrol boats, they came with submarines. Now, they fired torpedoes, 3, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4, 3, I think. Captain McGonigal, who was the captain of the ship, I'm a captain, so like this is not easy. To avoid torpedoes is not easy. It's
in a fully functioning boat, it's already difficult, yeah. Let alone
really, yeah. No, it's difficult, extremely difficult, especially a ship that's defenseless. Effectively, what are you going to use? 50 cal? You've got to use evasive measures to try and avoid the trajectory of the torpedo coming your way. It's not easy, but he managed to evade 2 out of the 3, but 1 hit. That's the one that blew that gaping hole, and they have to close out. That's when you call general quarters. You call general quarters, which means you seal every hatch. That means that anybody in the hatch that's been hit is going to be locked in. They're going to drown, and it's going to be nasty. And you can imagine how the guys, the sailors who were locking people in, can you imagine how that would make you feel? Obviously, it wouldn't feel good, would it? But it's what you got to do. So the ship was listing badly, and what they didn't know, and the Russians, they verified this, there was a Soviet ship that was in the area. And through a radio message, the Israelis realized, like, oh, there's a witness over there. That witness, they kept their mouths shut, the Russians, really. I mean, they said, but anyway. Bottom line is, they called the attack off. Now, even pilots, Israeli pilots, on record, said they questioned the order. Like, they did not know. Operational security, they were flying by. Many of them who were doing the flying didn't know until they were ordered, and they're like, "Can you repeat?" What? This apparently accidental attack on an Egyptian ship, absolute BS. The pilots themselves, who got guilt conscious, they've come out, and of course all that's suppressed to the best of their ability. But the facts are there for anybody who's serious about research and history. So the bottom line is, you could argue a divine act that ship didn't sink. Now, when the captain gave the abandoned ship order, which is the last thing you do, he literally called abandoned ship, and so they put life rafts in the water. If you abandon ship, you're going to need something to get into. What did the Israelis do? They fired on at least 3 of these big life rafts. They fired on them. This is a war crime, indisputably so. What's the point of that? You don't want any survivors, do you? You don't want no witnesses, no survivors. So that ship was intended to be sunk. Now, had that happened, do you know what would have happened in this world if that ship sunk?
An attack on Egypt. And we know there were already nuclear plans.
World War III. We came this close. They're doing it again now. We came this close. That doesn't even include the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's go there. We've come this close many times. We're in a bit of a coma here. We need to read the writing on the wall. So the ship, after launching life rafts, so you couldn't abandon the ship, you couldn't do anything. And the captain managed to limp back towards the Sixth Fleet. at which point the US government took total control. They diverted the ship to a station further away from the nearest station that made sense, because Sardinia, I think it was, because they could control the security, like they tightened it up. And it's a fascinating story. All of the crew members it's interrogation, I know interrogation techniques. So when they got there to this secret base, they were sat down, and then they had a trader's admiral who did the interrogations, and he acted like a father figure, like, oh, we're here to help you, we know you've been through a lot. Keep in mind, these guys have had to sail extra days on a ship with dead bodies that are rotting, and they were made to go in and remove the bodies. Like, the stench was so massive that guys couldn't even go in. Like, immediately they were vomiting from the stench of the dead bodies, and so they've gone through massive trauma. And here comes this admiral acting like a friend and a father figure, saying, just tell us what happened. So these guys spill the beans, and they all brought in isolation, so they all tell exactly, and then they're isolated, not allowed to talk to the guys who haven't been interrogated yet. After they say their piece, he then switches from good cop to bad cop. And he says, everything you've just said now, you will never utter these words again. Not to your crew members, not to your wives, not to your kids, not to nobody. And if you do...
And again, that's established. Yeah,
it is an established fact. They were threatened. Their careers and lives were threatened if they spoke. So they did. They remained silent for many years.
Exactly. And some of them spoke out not so long ago. That's why we know.
This is why we know.
Yeah. But you had a nice segue into the present, and maybe that's the last topic to discuss. Yeah. The pilots questioned the order. Yeah. And if we take this to October 7th, where we, as we know now from Israeli sources themselves, that Israeli helicopter pilots were ordered, instructed to shoot at anyone fleeing from this music festival, at least. Yeah? And there are pictures on social media of hundreds and hundreds of completely destroyed cars, which were burned out, charcoal bodies still inside. Yeah? Okay, we have some background noise. That were not caused by RGPs or light arms from Hamas. This must have been caused by Hellfire missiles from Apache helicopters. And again, we have Israeli pilot testimonies. We have reports in Haaretz and other Israeli publications stating from more and more witnesses that this is exactly what happens. And not only the helicopter pilots, but also tanks shot into houses where it was known that Israeli captives and Hamas fighters were to kill all of them. Yeah, that's called not the Samsung,
it's
doctrine,
the
Hannibal doctrine. That's where I want to go.
Directive,
yeah.
Yes.
So again, maybe from your perspective, I know you're quite knowledgeable, but maybe first, what's the Hannibal doctrine for those who do not know, and comment on September the 7th in that context.
So the Hannibal Directive is an affirmation of what I know, and I thank Henry Kissinger for saying this one, a very famous Jewish man who recently departed, God curse him, and he said that the military are nothing but dumb animals to be used. I appreciate that honesty. I know that's true. I was cannon fodder. I was an idiotic, brainwashed kid who volunteered to be a mercenary for the bankers, and they will sacrifice me, and we've got 24 dead bodies from America coming back home now with coffins draped with flags. We're cannon fodder. The Israelis, as a general rule, they really do covet Jewish life on a completely different level. However, for operational purposes, the Hannibal Directive is such. They know that, for instance, these hostages, they're problematic. It gets the conversation going about, well, the Palestinian prisoners, including women and children that are being raped and have been for decades.
And rounded up.
I've met tons of guys in the West Bank and Gaza who have been in prison. Every single one of them has been tortured. Every single one of them. So it brings in all these issues, right? So they'd rather have dead Israelis and soldiers than captive ones. And also, if you get a lot of dead Jewish Israelis, then you have a good excuse for war. So the Hannibal Directive...
Just to underline this point, 2 or 3 weeks ago, those 3 Israelis were shot by Israeli snipers, despite doing all the right things. So they had a white flag, they had no clothing on purpose, so there was somebody who knew what he did to show the Israelis there are no bombs strapped, so they tried to avoid anything and still they got shot. I heard they were with food, they painted on the wall, "We are Israelis." They talked and they screamed in Hebrew to the soldiers, which were quite close, "We are Israelis," and still they were shot.
Yes, yes. We're cannon fodder, and as a general rule, the Israelis have been a little bit more loyal to their own people because there are also consequences. Like, you don't really want too many dead Israelis, soldiers in particular, which again is part of the problem they're going through right now. It's not very popular. Anyway, the Hannibal Directive is that if you have civilians or military who are either at risk or for operational purposes become a liability, kill them. Like Israel killing Jewish Israelis, and it's called the Hannibal Directive. So that's an affirmation of what I know. I know we're cannon fodder too. I was too. They would happily sacrifice us. It would just mean we could have another war. Dead Americans equals war. So they'll sacrifice us, and that's their policy. The lies that were told by a parroting, prostituted media, 40 beheaded babies, remember that? The President of the United States repeated that lie, said he saw video proving this. So our President lied? Or was he just so stupid that he didn't realize? Come on.
Let's just be more specific. So the international press has even confirmed that there was a fake story. There's no dispute, nobody disputes today that that was a story equal to the story when Iraq invaded Saudi Arabia. Kuwait, absolutely. Yeah. Testified that she saw Iraqi soldiers taking babies out of the incubators and smashing them on the floor. Today we know she was the daughter of the ambassador, and it was actually a US PR company who came up with the story. This happened.
And we have other important things like rape, cutting out of fetuses of pregnant women. One of the things that is positive out of this horrendous sacrifice that the Palestinians are paying is that historically, whatever Israel said was just accepted, repeated, and
this is changing now.
Now, finally, people are realizing. I've been saying, and I shall repeat, as long as I'm breathing and talking, I'll repeat it. The only time the Israelis are telling the truth is when they're openly declaring their genocidal intent.
Which they do.
This is honest.
Which they do right now.
This is honest. When they say they don't want war, we don't have a partner in peace, we supported the two-state, they reject, you're lying. Everything you say is a lie. Unless, of course, you're openly declaring your Zionist agenda of exterminating the Palestinians and eliminating the only claimant that actually has lawful title and the right to return. If they get rid of the Palestinians, boom, problem solved. When you think as a psychopath does, this is what you do. This is one other thing people need to understand. If you want to understand the world, and you're a human being, and you have a heart, it's all going to be very confusing. None of it makes sense. But if you enter the mind of a psychopath, a sociopath, a narcissist, so if you don't know what those things are, study it a bit. Now, look at it from that way. Is that a healthy human? No. No, that's not healthy. That's not healthy. That is an emotionally disturbed, mentally deranged person that thinks that we can act this way. And they're very dangerous, and they happen to fill the halls of Congress and parliaments around the world. If you are a moral man or woman who cannot be bought, they say everyone can be bought, everyone has their, no. There are some of us cannot be bought.
Exception.
We don't reward these people, we punish them. We reward the criminals, we reward the pedophiles. We reward those that'll take the backhander who can be bought for chump change, quite frankly. The Congress is full of that. Traitors all. So this is the changing of the times that people are starting to realize that pretty much everything Israel says is a lie. Now they've become so cocky, so arrogant. We have never seen a genocide in history so openly declared. As a general rule, when you're committing genocide, you don't advertise that fact. Oh, we regret the loss of life. I could write the press releases for Israel better than they would. I know the game. I know how it works. And they're so arrogant. They really believe that, I mean, this is a fact. This is not my opinion. They subscribe to an ideology which isn't a spiritual ideology. You have atheist Jews. Do we have any atheist Muslims? If you don't believe in God, how are you a Muslim? Do we have atheist Christians? No. No. If you don't believe in God, how are you a Christian? But we have atheist Jews. I'm sorry, but isn't Judaism a religion?
There's this conflation now between Zionism and Judaism. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't believe in God, how is it possible that you can be an atheist Jew? Well, because perhaps atheism, that means you reject God. That doesn't mean you don't believe in God. It means you reject the idea of God. What's his name? Jordan Peterson is an example. Ricky Gervais is an example. We have many different atheists. The bottom line is this. The evidence to show that the Talmud, or the Old Testament, but especially the Talmud, in their own twisted minds, they genuinely believe that they are the chosen ones, and that the rest of us are what is called goyim, cattle. We are slaves. If we were able to discuss issues of history, facts, and we had real journalism, we wouldn't be so confused about these very simple principles. Americans suffer from supremacism. We're the greatest. Rah, rah. Freedom and democracy. That is a supremacist ideology. I am against all forms of supremacism. I do not care who applies it. Whether it is a white person, that doesn't mean you can't be proud. There's a difference. There's a difference between being proud as an Irishman, a white Irishman, and saying we're better than all of you. Or worse, not only are we better, but you're all slaves. This is their ideology, taught in the most grotesque of ways in the Talmud, to the degree that their own holy books state emphatically things like, 1, Jesus, they hate him. They hate Jesus. Jesus is boiling in hot excrement in hell. This is in the Talmud. Imagine something like that in the Quran or the Bible. Not the old Bible, the new one, the New Testament. 2, Mother Mary is a whore. In Islam, they love Mother Mary. They consider her to be the highest of the high in the female, literally. But the Jews, they hate her, and they hate Jesus as well. 3, in their holy book, they have the right to not only enslave us, but to rape our children. There's a little bit of a blurry line there at 2. 2 years old, it's kind of a little bit discouraged, that one. But if they're 3 and older, being slaves, they get to rape us. It's in their holy book. Now, if I was lying about this, or I was wrong about this, do you know how much they would have crucified me by now? These are facts. Why don't you know it? Because they told you your history. And they tell you your news. They lie. But that lie, all of these lies, you tell one lie, now you got to tell 2 to cover the first one. Now you got to tell 4 to cover the second 2 after the first one. It just unravels. We're in the unraveling stage right now.
Netanyahu used the meanwhile infamous statement or reference to Amalek.
Yes.
And I had
honesty. There's honesty for you. This is their honest perspective.
An interview with Emeritus Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro 2 weeks ago. He does remarkably well, I have to say. And we discussed this, yeah. And a fact that, from supposedly the Jewish God, instructions come to annihilate enemies of Israel. Every woman, child, even the dogs
livestock,
and the donkeys, have to eliminate.
Crops.
Yeah. And Netanyahu made this as a reference in regards to the Palestinians. Yeah. Basically, he's calling for what you only can describe as genocide, right?
And I had a problem with the Old Testament, they call it, or the Torah, if you like. I always had a problem with it. When I knew of it, even as a young kid, God sounds like egotistical, genocidal maniac. in that book. Really, like seriously. But I realized only later, and that kind of threw me off religion, which I confused with spirituality. Two very different things in the modern world. I'm a very spiritual man. I was raised Catholic. The Catholic Church has been raping choir boys and others in Ireland and all over and covering it up. Well, can I be a proud Catholic if that's the bishops and cardinals? Like, these are holy men? Raping? No. But does that mean that I don't believe in God or I'm going to reject God? No. It means that religion has been co-opted, subverted, infiltrated, and turned into anti-religion. And it has become so pervasive that you have most everybody is secular at this point. In this country, in England, Europe as a whole. So they detach us from source and God by perverting religion, which makes all of us who can think like reject religion, but we confuse religion with spirituality. If you don't believe you have a soul, God bless you and God help you. You do have a soul. It is eternal, but you can literally sell your soul. You can. Israelis do that. In fact, they chose the opposite side. There is evil. Surely we can all agree there's evil. Some would call it Lucifer or Satan. I know this much. The proof that the church of Satan exists and is alive and well, and their prized possession, what does Satan want? Basically the opposite of God. God wants, He gave us everything we need to live in abundance. This is a beautiful dominion we're in here. He loves us, and He gave us free will. He gave us the choice. That's up to us. Maybe that's a reflection or proof of eternal spirit. There will be a cost with what you choose to do with your free will. So this reality, all of this truth, I love Jesus, I love Him. And my favorite quote of all time, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. If you believe lies, you will never be free and easily duped. This is the world we've been living in for too long. 2024, as far as I'm concerned, justice. Justice.
On that note, two things. First of all, is there any topic that we didn't cover that you feel we should? And then I want to know what's the story with your $5 bill.
Yes. Okay, well, the $5 bill will allow me to tie into what I would like to say. Now it's two $5 bills here. So this is the one, if you go to the currency exchange and go get yourself a dollar bill, it's going to look like this one. Now, you can take a shot of this, show it on the screen later, but the two things that are important to note about this is just a normal modern dollar in the modern age. It has a green seal. It's relevant for a reason. And it also says three words up here. Those words are Federal Reserve Note. Okay. What is the Federal Reserve? Well, first off, it ain't federal.
And it has no reserves.
There's no reserves. And it's actually a private bank. It's a private bank owned and controlled by the Rothschilds. This is an instrumental part of communism, by the way. You have one money supplier. They have a total monopoly on the creation of money. They do it at interest, usury. Remember Jesus? He had a problem with the money lenders. In fact, he got real pissed. Jesus was a fighter, man. He did not like that. How are you using this temple, a holy place, to do your usury business? So, this is a Federal Reserve note. That's a private bank. Every single dollar that is issued, every single one, comes at interest. So, the amount of money in circulation is not payable. We can never pay the debt, ever. They use this system to give loans to little, quote, third world nations for infrastructure that makes big developers lots of money, and the corrupt politicians in these countries lots of money. And it rapes the countries and indebts them. So they're owned by the IMF or the World Bank. They'll never be able to repay the debt. Now, remember, green seal, Federal Reserve, private Rothschilds, bank, debt, never can be paid back. Dollar. This one is different. Here we have a red seal. Now this was issued in an interesting year, 1963. What was happening in 1963? I think there was a president. Oh, I think he's Irish, actually. Oh yeah, I think everybody in the world knows this guy. I think pretty much everybody loves him. Certainly Marilyn Monroe did, since he liked to have affairs, which I'm very much against. But he was a stooge. He did all the things that he was meant to do, but he had a moment of clarity and awareness that changed him. The Cuban Missile Crisis, where the Soviets were going to put silos in Cuba when we were already putting nuclear silos in Europe. Okay. So, tit for tat. If you're going to put them over there right next to us, we're going to put them right next to you. Kennedy got real bad advice from the so-called intelligence services, in particular the CIA. And that bad advice led us to the brink of World War III. To the brink. In fact, the world was waiting on bated breath for the news, literally. Everybody's forgotten that now, literally. And when that happened, I believe that was the Kennedy moment, where he was like, I get all these perks, I live in the White House, I'm an adulterer, so I get to have sex with Marilyn Monroe. Everybody loves me. He was a great speaker. And by the way, he traveled.
I'm waiting, I'm sitting at the edge of my chair to figure out what the heck is about this red seal.
So when he brought the world to the brink of World War III, something flipped. Something flipped. He got real upset at the CIA. And he also didn't like Israel, what it was doing. And at the time that he issued this, he did several things.
So this is an official?
This is a 1963 issue.
So it's not someone playing around with this printer. This is an official.
No, okay. I have several of these. These will be collector's items. Trust me, they'll be worth a lot of money someday. Please don't take all my notes. I want to buy some more too. Anyway, the red seal is important. Remember, green seal, red seal. The more important thing, aside from 1963, President John F. Kennedy, up here, oh wait, it doesn't say Federal Reserve note. It says United States note. That means the U.S. government, which every government has the ability to do. Canada used to do it. Germany did it. A whole bunch of other places did it. And guess what? They got really good results. You know what they did? They managed to go ahead and keep any debt at a very reasonable and payable level. Now, this United States note, that's not at interest. It's not a private bank. And JFK was dead within 6 months of issuing this $5 note. We could solve the problems that we face right now. I have said over and over, like a broken record, the head of the snake is the financial system. The reason why they hate people like Gaddafi
and
Saddam Hussein, John F. Kennedy, and the last one, a man named Adolf Hitler. He outlawed usury. Jesus didn't like usury either. Now, the history tells us that we shouldn't entertain anything possibly good about this man. But I'll tell you what I know I like and I respect. He ended the usury that now translates to, I don't know what it is here in the Netherlands. In the UK, I think it's like 6-7 trillion pounds. In America, we've just hit $34 trillion. First off, even if we ventured to pay back the debt, there isn't enough money in circulation to even pay it back. So who are we in debt to? They want to say it's China. They want to say it's this. They want to say everyone, but the Federal Reserve Bank. And who owns that? It's a private bank. Am I anti-Semitic for pointing out that the Rothschilds-controlled Federal Reserve Bank has indebted not only America, the Bank of England? Who owns that? The Rothschilds have owned that since the 1700s.
Okay. Ken, it was a fascinating journey talking to you. I actually lost track of time. We have had quite a discussion, and I'm 100% sure we could go another 2 hours at least. Yeah. I cannot say differently. It was a fascinating journey. There are many people who do not agree with you. There are arguments to that, but you are a man of experience, and you have committed your life to a cause. And you are doing this now since 20, 30 years, I don't know how long, consistently. You put virtually your own life at risk for others with no other ulterior motives, right? So I think there are very few who can claim that. Okay, so it was my privilege talking to you, and as in all my interviews of that sort, I do not claim neutrality, because I cannot see what happens in Gaza right now in any other way than a string of academics that I have interviewed see too. This is a war crime and this is genocide. Okay, and you have said this 15 years ago. You were heavily criticized and attacked based on it, but slowly the world is waking up. And this has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, which is now conflated purposefully with Zionism. And if anyone have a doubt that this is not the case, watch my interview with Emeritus Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. Okay? Ken, my absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Accomplish.
Thank you.